How are you going to know when the proverbial SHTF, when it hits the fan? How are you going to know when you've crossed that threshold where it's time to bug out, where it's time to load the shotgun, where it's time to batten down the hatches? What are going to be the criteria that you base that decision on? Well, today we're going to talk about it. Let's get to it. The government's job is to keep everybody calm no matter how dire the circumstances get. The job of the government is to govern, to make people interact in a way which is civil and cordial. Now, on the flip side, the media's job is to petrify the hell out of people, to keep eyeballs on the screen, scare the crap out of people while appeasing their shareholders, because these guys all go to the same parties, the government officials and the high-ranking execs at these media agencies, so they can't go too overboard. Okay, they had to, whip people into a frenzy, but just enough of a frenzy to keep the economy going. So there's a balance there. So how do you know then if the government on the one hand is trying to just keep you calm, no matter what the circumstances, even if the bombs are inbound, they still want you to stay calm, cool, and collected, get under your desk, duck and cover, and everything will be all fine, right? On the flip side, the media might exaggerate certain parts of the situation, but they're also not going to tell you exactly what is going on. And we all know this, because there's going to come a point in the breakdown of rule of law and order and societal collapse in which it's going to become apparent that what you're seeing with your own eyes and coming through your own senses and the own sounds, that you're hearing gunshots and police sirens and all the rest, is going to be incongruent with what you're seeing on your television set or with what you're seeing in today's presidential address. There's going to come a point where people are no longer going to believe, where there's going to be a complete breakdown in confidence. There's going to come this point where the scarcity of resources becomes so real to people. And maybe we can work together as a community to try to give this a name. Okay, there's a breaking point. There's a flash point. It's like a mass recognition that this is it and it's time to panic. Okay, what are some cues going to be? Because remember, in order to start a herd, like we seen in that concert not too long ago, it doesn't take that many people to start the stampede. It really just takes a handful of people to start a riot, or any movement for that matter. It really just takes one person to cast the first stone, and maybe a few orbiters to kind of get in on the mix. And before you know it, people start to reference that, and it just seems like everybody's doing it, so I might as well join in at the same time. What are some of the triggers going to be that sets things off, where you hit that inflection point of chaos in society, where everything is more or less okay, and then all of a sudden it's not? All of a sudden you have everybody storming the toilet paper aisle. Now, it's in the interest of government and big business to bring the plane down as slow as possible, so to minimize panic on the way down. It serves them no use whatsoever at all for panic to ensue in the slightest, unless it is somehow manageable and a part of some Machiavellian ploy to keep people controlled or whatever the heck. Now, I want you to think about something. There's something called psychological pricing. And there's all of these social psychological principles with respect to pricing things, especially with price increases. Marketers and advertisers know if they raise their prices by too much, people are either going to outright reject it, or they're going to notice. First of all, there's a certain point where people aren't going to notice things. If you're slowly raising gas prices by maybe 3 cents every other week, and you do that consistently for a year, well, by the end of the year, the gas prices are going to be through the roof, but everybody's going to have slowly acclimated to it, as opposed to taking the same price and raising it instantaneously, and then there's that shock factor. Then people notice, people start to talk about it, people start to panic. And that's when you start to get breakdowns, you start to get lineups, you start to get people hoarding, stockpiling. This is when the whole system starts to break down. Because this is what happens. If you're the manufacturer of a product and you know that you are going to have to raise your prices, say 50% in the next year, you never want to do it all at once, and you never want to announce it with so much lead time that people can clean you out of your inventory unless you place some kind of limits, because this is what's going to happen. Okay, let's say that Silky Saws decides to raise the price of their saws by 50%. Well, every person is going to go out and buy a Silky Saw at these current prices, and they're basically going to be cleaned out of inventory, as opposed to incrementally raising prices 10% every couple months. 10%, it's a lot, okay, but it's not a shocker. Now, I've seen this happen with many companies who are systematically raising their prices by 5% every few months so that people don't notice, or that the shock factor isn't there, so that people aren't hoarding stuff. And the same thing is going to happen if we start to see a slow burn degradation of the social fabric that knits all of our civilities together. Collapse is going to be slow, just like the frog in boiling water. There's that flashpoint. Maybe we could use the frog metaphor to get some language so we can understand this concept, or give it a name. Give this concept a name. Maybe it's the jump off point. Okay, it's that point when people realize the discrepancy between what they're being told and what they're seeing with their own eyes. Within society, you have a normal distribution of conformity, okay? The majority of people are very conformist. They're going to heed what is said on the news. They're going to believe what is said on the news, and they're going to follow its lead. But the thing with the majority of those people, 90% of people who don't care about prepping at all, it doesn't really matter if they notice that the store shelves are inconsistent with what is being shown on the television, because all it takes is a few percent of people to start to panic, to create the stampede, to create those 90% of people, to get them all in a fluff, and to create social chaos. So this is what happened with the toilet paper crisis in March 2020. And really, the pandemic plays this out perfectly. Because what happened in January was we seen all these warning signs. We seen them gradually acclimatize. Some people say acclimatize, some people say acclimate. I like acclimate, it flows off the tongue better. We've seen people acclimate to this idea that maybe there's going to be a pandemic. There's some people saying, it's even in March, when it was actually announced, that when the WHO came out, after the market had already anticipated this and pretty much crashed. And the reason why they did that, or at least I speculated at the time, is that they wanted to buy more time. They didn't want to come out all at once and say it. So you prime people with the truth, with the reality of the situation, so when it finally arrives, it's not as shocking. Okay, just like the Fed has been talking about or throwing out hints of tapering for the last 6 months. Oh, when's the Fed going to taper? Is it going to be next month or next month? And then finally, when they finally do come out and say, okay, maybe we're going to start to possibly somewhat taper a little bit, it's not as big of a shock to the system. So the markets don't react. In fact, the markets reacted worse when there was just speculation about it. So now that the Fed is actually going to be tapering their purchases soon with the funny money, it's not as big of a shock to the system. And now what happened with the toilet paper fiasco of 2020 was this, is that toilet paper takes up an inordinate amount of space in the shelves, okay? You can have 2,000 cans of soup on the shelf, but you can only maybe have 100 things of toilet paper because they're big. So what happens then is that it's one of the first things to go. And then, of course, the media starts to talk about it. The media starts to talk about it. People just hear toilet paper running low. All of a sudden, they want to go and get some, and it kind of feeds on each other. As a bit of a sidebar, the whole toilet paper collapse that I somewhat contributed to with all those toilet paper tablet videos, it says something about our society. It's really telling, because it says that we're so vain and we are so out of touch with the priorities of our human needs to what keeps us alive, that instead of prioritizing our base needs, like stocking up on food, we go to the penultimate thing that we need, which is what you need when it's coming out the other side. Most people didn't have enough food in their homes to justify the amount of toilet paper wiping that they would have to do. Sorry about the visuals, but it's just the truth. So in a video that I have coming up in a few weeks, we're going to look at what are the telltale signs that the proverbial shizzy is really about to hit the fizzy, and what are the signs that the stampede, okay, what are the signs that the herd is about to swerve in another direction? What are things that precede the jump-off point, that precede the inflection point? It's really the mass recognition of scarcity. And like I said, it doesn't take a big part of society to trigger the panic. It just takes a small amount of people to start doing something, and that snowballs because then the media starts to talk about it. The same way that Facebook and Twitter and all these social media platforms grew. I don't know if some of you guys maybe are too young to remember, but they grew because the media kept talking about them. And the more the media talked about them, it was like a self-fulfilling prophecy. It was like free advertising. Okay, so this is how it's going to unfold. Now, the government's there to tell people that everything is going to be calm. They played the role with the WHO. Everything's going to be calm. Just don't worry about it. Don't wear the mask. You guys know the whole story, right? And then, of course, it flips. They overreact on the back end of things. So let me know what you guys think we should call this phenomena. Perhaps there's a name for it already that just evades me for some reason. Let me know in the comments section below, and stay tuned because in a few weeks we're going to be releasing a video about what the telltale signs are that things are about to get wild. Thanks for watching, guys. Stay safe. Canadian Prepper out.
The best way to support this channel is to support yourself by gearing up at CanadianPreparedness.com, where you'll find high-quality survival gear at the best prices, no junk, and no gimmicks. Use discount code PREPPINGGEAR for 10% off. Don't forget, the strong survive, but the prepared thrive. Stay safe. The best way